Before you move any further into this day, pay attention to something that may seem insignificant at first glance but carries more meaning than you realize. The fact that you are here right now, encountering these words on the 5th of June, is occurring alongside an inner movement that has likely been unfolding quietly for some time. It is not dramatic. It is not demanding recognition. Yet beneath the routines of daily life, beneath the conversations, responsibilities, and distractions that normally occupy your attention, there is a subtle current gathering strength. You may have noticed hints of it already. Perhaps your mind has become more active when everything around you is quiet. Perhaps emotions you thought were settled have begun pressing closer to the surface. Perhaps there is an unusual feeling that something inside you wants to be acknowledged, even if you cannot yet explain exactly what it is. What matters is that this experience is not emerging without purpose. There is an underlying rhythm moving through your life right now, and whether you fully understand it or not, you are already participating in it. If any part of what you are hearing reflects your own experience, allow yourself to recognize that connection. Let yourself become present with it rather than dismissing it, because this is not simply a message you are observing from the outside. In ways that may only become clear later, you are woven into the very process it describes. What makes this period so significant is not what is happening around you, but what is quietly accumulating within you. There is a form of pressure developing, but unlike the obvious pressures that arrive through conflict or external demands, this one moves differently. It gathers slowly. It builds beneath awareness. It waits. Then, almost unexpectedly, it begins revealing itself through small shifts in your emotional landscape. You may notice yourself becoming less tolerant of things you once ignored. Reactions that normally felt manageable may suddenly feel stronger. Memories may appear without invitation, carrying emotional intensity that seems larger than the moment that triggered them. At first, this can feel confusing. The conscious mind naturally searches for immediate explanations. It wants a clear cause, a simple answer, something concrete to point to. Yet what is happening reaches deeper than surface circumstances. This is not emotional disorder. It is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is the result of experiences, feelings, and unresolved emotional material that were placed aside at earlier stages of your life because survival, growth, or responsibility required your attention elsewhere. You kept moving. You adapted. You continued forward. But what remains unprocessed does not disappear. It waits until there is enough internal readiness for it to return. And now, whether you expected it or not, that readiness is beginning to emerge. Your deeper awareness recognizes this timing long before your logical mind catches up. That is why certain emotions seem to be resurfacing now. They are not returning to create disruption. They are returning because something unfinished is seeking completion. There is a profound difference between being interrupted by the past and being invited into a deeper understanding of it. What is surfacing is not asking you to become trapped in old experiences. It is asking you to see them differently. And as this process unfolds, something remarkable begins to happen. Awareness sharpens. Connections that once seemed invisible suddenly become obvious. Events that felt isolated begin linking together like pieces of a larger picture. Emotional reactions that once appeared random start revealing their origins. Current situations begin reflecting themes that have been quietly repeating throughout different chapters of your life. This can be uncomfortable because clarity often arrives before certainty. You may find yourself asking questions that refuse to go away. Why does this particular experience still affect me? Why is this feeling appearing now after so much time? Why does this pattern continue repeating itself? Yet these questions are not signs that you are lost. They are evidence that something within you is waking up. They are indicators that unconscious material is moving into conscious awareness. And once awareness touches something that was previously hidden, it can never return to invisibility in quite the same way again. There are also moments during this process when the past seems to appear without warning. A memory may emerge suddenly. A feeling may arise with unexpected intensity. A situation in the present may trigger a reaction that feels far larger than the event itself. In those moments, it can seem as though you are being pulled backward. It may feel as if old chapters are reopening. Yet appearances can be deceptive. This is not a return to who you once were. It is a return to what happened, carrying a completely different level of consciousness. and that distinction changes everything. The version of you who first lived through those experiences no longer exists in the same form. You have gained perspective, you have gained resilience, you have gained understanding. Because of that, what once overwhelmed you now has the potential to be observed from a different vantage point. The emotion may still be present, but your relationship to it is changing. Instead of being consumed by it, you are becoming capable of witnessing it. Instead of being trapped within it, you are beginning to understand it. This is not about creating pain. It is about ending repetition. Emotional wounds that remain unseen often continue influencing decisions, reactions, and perceptions long after the original event has passed. When they are finally brought into awareness, they lose the need to keep recreating themselves through new circumstances. What appears to be a setback is often a hidden form of advancement. The movement is simply taking place beneath the surface where it cannot yet be measured by external results. And as this deeper process continues, another shift begins quietly unfolding. It is subtle enough that you might overlook it if you are only searching for dramatic signs of change, yet it is there, beneath the emotions, beneath the memories, beneath the questions. A new sense of space is beginning to emerge. Tension that has lived within you for longer than you realized is starting to loosen its grip. The change may be slight at first. You may only notice brief moments of relief, small openings where heaviness once felt permanent. But those moments matter. They signal the beginning of release, and release rarely arrives in a way that feels comfortable or predictable. Often it feels uncertain. Often it feels like standing between two versions of yourself, no longer fully attached to what has been, yet not completely certain about what comes next. Familiar emotional structures begin dissolving before new ones have fully formed. This uncertainty can be unsettling because the mind prefers certainty, even when that certainty is limiting. Yet this stage serves an important purpose. Something old is losing its hold, and whenever that happens, there is naturally a period where clarity has not fully replaced what is fading. Trust that movement is taking place even if you cannot yet see its final destination, because beneath everything that is surfacing, beneath every memory, emotion, realization, and question, something meaningful is already changing. And what may feel uncertain now is preparing the ground for what will soon become impossible to ignore. What is happening inside you now may be far more important than anything taking place around you. Beneath the surface of your daily life, beneath the routines that have become familiar and the emotional patterns that have felt fixed for so long, something has begun to loosen. Energy that remained suspended, sometimes for years without your awareness, is finally starting to move again. And whenever something long held in place begins to shift, it alters far more than a single emotional memory. It changes the way you perceive yourself, the way you interpret your experiences, and even the way you respond to the world around you. At first, this movement can feel unsettling because part of you has grown accustomed to carrying what was once necessary to survive. Yet nothing valuable is being taken away from you. This is not a process of loss. It is a process of liberation. What is unfolding is the release of something that has been waiting patiently beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when you would be ready to encounter it differently. As this unfolds, a deeper stage of the journey quietly emerges. It asks something very different from you than what you may be used to offering. Most people have learned to approach their emotions as problems to solve. The moment discomfort appears, the instinct is to analyze it, define it, fix it, and move beyond it as quickly as possible. But there are moments in life when understanding is not the first step. There are moments when the greatest transformation comes not from controlling an experience, but from allowing it to exist long enough to reveal what it contains. This stage requires a different form of presence. It asks you to remain with what you feel without immediately trying to change it into something else. For many people, this feels unfamiliar because it challenges habits developed over years of emotional self-protection. The mind wants conclusions. The mind wants certainty. The mind wants efficiency. Yet what is happening now is not asking for efficiency. It is asking for honesty. There is a profound difference between being consumed by an emotion and allowing yourself to fully acknowledge its existence. One creates overwhelm. The other creates awareness. When you stop fighting what is already present within you, something remarkable begins to occur. Emotions that once felt heavy begin revealing information they could never share while being resisted. Feelings transform into insight. Experiences gain context. Reactions begin exposing their deeper origins. This shift cannot be forced through willpower. It cannot be achieved by thinking harder or analyzing faster. It emerges naturally through acceptance. And while acceptance may initially feel uncomfortable, it is often the doorway through which genuine understanding enters. Something real is beginning to form within you, something that could never emerge while parts of yourself remained hidden from view. During this period, you may notice an unusual quality entering even the simplest moments of your life. Experiences that once seemed ordinary may suddenly feel layered with meaning. A brief pause in your day may carry an unexpected depth. A thought that would normally disappear may remain in your awareness for hours. Silence itself may feel different, almost as though it contains information waiting to be heard. This heightened sensitivity can feel unfamiliar because it alters your relationship with the world around you. There may be moments when everything feels more intense than usual. Yet intensity is not always a sign of imbalance. Sometimes it is evidence that awareness is expanding beyond its previous limits. As emotions that have been suppressed begin rising into consciousness, your perception naturally becomes more refined. You start noticing details that were always present but remained outside your awareness. Layers that once blended into the background begin standing out with surprising clarity. And through this process, you move beyond simple reaction. You become an observer of yourself. You begin recognizing patterns, emotional textures, and inner movements that were shaping your experience long before you knew they existed. One of the most difficult aspects of this stage is that awareness often arrives before understanding. Emotions may intensify while answers remain frustratingly distant. This can create a sense of disorientation because many people unconsciously expect clarity to arrive immediately after recognition. There is often an assumption that once something hidden becomes visible, it should instantly make sense. Yet transformation rarely follows such a direct path. Instead, this process stretches your relationship with uncertainty. It asks you to remain present while meaning slowly reveals itself. You may find yourself revisiting the same thoughts repeatedly, examining them from different angles, searching for the connection that seems just beyond reach. You may feel as though you are standing at the edge of an important realization, while being unable to fully grasp it. That experience can create quiet frustration. It can feel as though you are almost there, yet not quite, and in those moments, it becomes easy to believe that nothing meaningful is happening. But beneath the surface, something extraordinarily intricate is taking place. Your inner world is reorganizing itself. Emotional patterns are being viewed from entirely new perspectives. Experiences that once seemed disconnected are beginning to reveal hidden relationships. Old emotional imprints are gradually softening in ways that cannot yet be measured from the outside. The reason clarity has not arrived all at once is because what is emerging within you extends far beyond the intellectual mind. It involves emotions, memories, energy, perception, and layers of experience accumulated over time. These cannot be reduced to a single explanation or solved through logic alone. True clarity develops gradually. It forms piece by piece like an image slowly coming into focus after existing in shadow for far longer than you realized. What appears inactive from the outside may actually be a period of profound preparation. There is also an invitation hidden within this uncertainty, one that challenges a deeply ingrained human tendency. The instinct to rush toward resolution can be powerful. The desire to know, to conclude, to divine, and to move on often feels irresistible. It's something within you is being asked to practice a different kind of patience, not passive waiting, but conscious presence, a patience that remains engaged even without immediate answers, a patience that allows questions to exist without forcing conclusions, a patience that permits emotions to move naturally without immediately assigning labels or meanings. This kind of awareness requires courage because it means staying present with what has not yet fully revealed itself. Yet it is precisely within this space that deeper understanding begins to take shape, and when clarity eventually arrives, it does not appear as a fragile idea that requires constant validation. It arrives as recognition. It carries a quiet certainty that feels different from intellectual conclusions. It settles into you naturally. There is no need to defend it, no need to force belief in it. You simply know. That is why this current pause should not be mistaken for stagnation. What appears to be stillness is actually a necessary space where deeper integration is occurring beyond the reach of conscious thought. Beneath the questions, beneath the uncertainty, beneath the absence of immediate answers, your inner landscape is rearranging itself, and even now, before the full picture becomes visible, part of you already senses this movement. There is a subtle knowing that refuses to disappear, a quiet awareness that something significant is unfolding despite the lack of obvious evidence. This is not the absence of progress. It is progress in one of its most profound forms, developing layer by layer beneath the surface. As this expansion of awareness continues, the experience becomes even more personal. The landscape within you grows more complex, revealing a tension that is difficult to fully describe yet impossible to ignore. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive through chaos or conflict. Instead, it exists as a steady pull operating beneath your thoughts. One part of you can feel the future calling. It senses the possibility of something new. It recognizes what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. It is ready to release old attachments, old emotional burdens, and familiar limitations. There is openness there. There is openness there. There is anticipation there. There is even excitement. Yet alongside that movement forward, another force remains present, creating the deeply personal tension that is beginning to make itself known. Yet even as one part of you begins leaning toward what is next, there remains another part that instinctively reaches toward what has always been familiar. This is not because you are unwilling to grow. It is not because you are sabotaging your progress or refusing to embrace change. The deeper truth is far more human than that. Familiarity has its own gravity. Even experiences that were restrictive, emotionally heavy, or no longer align with who you are can still provide a sense of predictability. They create structures that your mind has learned to navigate. They offer known outcomes, known reactions, and known identities. And when those structures begin dissolving, something within you naturally pauses, not because it wants to remain trapped, but because stepping beyond what is known means entering territory that has not yet revealed its shape. This is where the inner conflict becomes impossible to ignore. You may experience moments when everything feels crystal clear. There are periods when the next step appears obvious, when your heart feels aligned, when the direction ahead seems undeniable. During those moments, it may feel as though the transition is already complete. You can see what no longer belongs in your life. You can feel what is asking to emerge. You can sense the future drawing closer. Yet just as suddenly, uncertainty returns. Questions begin appearing again. Doubts quietly re-enter the conversation. A subtle pull toward familiar habits, familiar beliefs, or familiar emotional patterns makes itself known. This movement can feel frustrating because it seems to contradict the clarity you experienced only moments before. You may wonder why certainty disappears after feeling so strong. You may question whether your progress is real. You may even begin evaluating yourself harshly, believing that if you were truly ready, hesitation would no longer exist. But transformation does not move according to those expectations. Growth is rarely linear. It rarely follows a direct path from one state of being to another without revisiting old territory along the way. Real change unfolds through layers. It moves through cycles. It revisits familiar emotional spaces, but each time from a different level of awareness. What feels like repetition is often refinement. What feels like going backward is frequently evidence that something deeper is being integrated. The significance of this phase does not lie in the presence of inner conflict. The significance lies in the way your relationship with that conflict begins to evolve. Instead of viewing it as an obstacle standing in your way, you gradually recognize that it is part of the transition itself. It is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that multiple parts of your inner world are adjusting to a reality that is changing faster than they can fully comprehend. This process reaches beyond external circumstances. You're not merely releasing situations, habits, or experiences. Something far more fundamental is occurring. The way you understand yourself is being reshaped. The identity that carried you through previous chapters of your life is no longer fitting in the same way it once did. Yet, the new version of yourself is still emerging. It has not fully revealed its contours. It has not yet become familiar. And because of that, different aspects of your being respond differently to the transition. There are parts of you that are eager for expansion. They recognize the necessity of change. They are ready to release old attachments and embrace new possibilities. But there are also parts that require more time, parts that need reassurance, parts that need to feel safe before they can fully trust what is unfolding. Neither side is wrong. Neither side is wrong if L side is working against the other. They are participating in the same transformation from different perspectives. This is why the tension can feel so deeply personal. You are standing in a space that belongs to neither your past nor your future. The person you once were no longer feels like a complete reflection of who you had become. Yet the person you are becoming has not fully stepped into view. There is a strange and often intense feeling that arises in this territory. Everything becomes heightened. Thoughts seem louder, emotions seem closer to the surface. Internal shifts that might once have gone unnoticed suddenly feel significant. At times, this heightened awareness can be mistaken for instability. Yet instability is not what you are experiencing. What you are witnessing is movement. It is the natural sensation of transformation taking place while it is still unfolding. The most important thing during this stage is not forcing an answer. It is not choosing one side of yourself over the other. It is allowing both realities to exist at the same time without judgment. The aspect of you that is ready to move forward does not need to silence the aspect that still feels uncertain. Likewise, the part that hesitates is not attempting to sabotage your future. It is seeking understanding. It is trying to orient itself within unfamiliar territory. Once you begin recognizing this dynamic, something begins to soften. The internal struggle loses its sharp edges. What once felt like division starts feeling more like dialogue. The tension no longer appears as evidence that you are stuck. Instead, it reveals itself as guidance. It becomes a conversation between different layers of your own awareness, each contributing something valuable to the process. And as this understanding deepens, a new kind of direction begins emerging. Not the forced certainty that comes from pressure, not the artificial confidence that tries to eliminate all doubt. Something far more stable starts taking shape. It arises through alignment. It emerges naturally as different parts of your inner world begin moving toward greater harmony. The answers you have been searching for do not arrive because you force them into existence. They arrive because you create enough space for them to reveal themselves. There is a stage in every profound transformation that often goes unnoticed, precisely because it lacks dramatic external signs. It is a threshold that people frequently cross without realizing how close they have come to something significant. There are no flashing signals announcing its arrival. There are no obvious markers confirming that change is occurring. From the outside, life may appear exactly as it did before. The routines remain familiar, the environment remains recognizable, the responsibilities remain largely unchanged. Looking at your life from a distance, it might seem as though very little has shifted at all. Yet beneath that appearance, an extraordinary process is unfolding with remarkable precision. This threshold is not measured by what has changed around you, it is measured by what has changed within you. The emotional storms that once felt overwhelming have begun settling into a more fluid state. The patterns that once appeared fixed and permanent have started loosening their hold. Perspectives that seemed impossible to access before are becoming available. Situations that once triggered immediate reactions are now being viewed through a wider lens. These shifts may appear subtle. They may not generate dramatic moments worthy of immediate recognition. Yet their significance cannot be overstated. They are creating the foundation upon which everything that follows will be built. What makes this stage particularly challenging is that it often resembles stillness. Sometimes it even resembles stagnation. You may find yourself questioning whether all the emotional work, all the awareness, all the reflection has produced anything tangible. You may wonder whether real change is actually occurring, or whether you have simply become more aware of the same patterns. Yet this apparent stillness is far from empty. Beneath the quiet surface, movement continues. It simply has not yet reached a form that can be easily observed. What is happening now is recalibration. Different aspects of your inner experience are being reorganized. Emotional insights are settling into place. New understandings are finding their relationship to old beliefs. Separate pieces are gradually forming a more cohesive whole. Because much of this occurs beneath conscious awareness, it is easy to underestimate its importance. The mind tends to value visible results. It wants evidence. It wants confirmation. Yet some of the most significant transformations occur long before external proof appears. Deep change often begins in silence. It begins in invisible shifts of perception, emotion, and understanding. It begins in moments that seem ordinary while something extraordinary is quietly being assembled beneath the surface. And as this process continues, another subtle change begins emerging. It may not announce itself immediately. It may arrive so gently that you only recognize it after it has already begun, yet it changes everything. Your relationship with uncertainty itself starts to transform. What once felt threatening begins losing some of its power. What once demanded immediate answers begins creating less urgency. Without fully realizing it, you are becoming capable of existing within the unknown in a different way. And that shift, though quiet, marks the beginning of an entirely new level of awareness. Something remarkable begins to happen when you remain in the process long enough. The uncertainty that once seemed difficult to tolerate gradually loses its intensity. What previously felt uncomfortable, unsettling, or emotionally demanding starts becoming easier to hold. Not because every question has been answered, and not because every loose end has been tied together, but because your relationship with uncertainty itself is changing. There is less urgency, less pressure to immediately understand every emotion, every realization, every shift taking place within you. You begin noticing that the need for instant clarity no longer controls your experience the way it once did. The constant search for answers starts quieting. The restless desire to force meaning from every feeling begins softening, and in its place, something far more stable starts to emerge. What is developing inside you is not certainty about the future, it is trust. A deeper trust than many people ever allow themselves to experience. Trust in the process. Trust in your own ability to move through uncertainty. Trust that not everything needs to reveal itself immediately in order to be real. This shift is subtle enough that you may not recognize it while it is happening. Yet it changes everything. For so long, perhaps without even realizing it, you may have relied on external confirmation to feel secure. You wanted visible signs, you wanted visible signs, you wanted evidence, you wanted reassurance that things were moving in the right direction. But now something different is taking shape. Stability is beginning to come from within, rather than from what is happening around you. And once that begins, the entire experience of transformation changes. Then, almost unexpectedly, a realization begins forming beneath the surface. It does not arrive dramatically. There is no lightning strike of insight, no overwhelming breakthrough that instantly changes everything. Instead, it emerges quietly, almost gently. A knowing begins to settle into your awareness. You recognize something that perhaps you could not see before. You are no longer standing where you once stood. You are not carrying experiences in the same way. You are not interpreting life through the same lens. Even if you cannot identify the exact day it happened, even if there is no single moment you can point to as the turning point, something fundamental has shifted. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of genuine transformation. The threshold itself is rarely obvious. People often imagine growth as a dramatic event. They expect a clear dividing line between who they were and who they are becoming. Yet, most of the time, the transition happens so gradually that it becomes visible only in retrospect. One day you look back and realize that your reactions are different. Your priorities have changed. The things that once consumed your energy no longer hold the same power. Situations that once created emotional turbulence now move through you with greater ease. The change did not happen overnight, but it happened nonetheless. You are closer than you realize to an entirely new way of moving through your life. Not a final destination, not a perfect state where every challenge disappears. Something far more meaningful, a new relationship with yourself, a new relationship with your emotions, a new relationship with uncertainty, growth, and change. Even if the complete picture remains hidden, there is already a part of you that understands this. It exists beneath thought, beneath analysis, beneath the endless search for explanations. It is a quiet awareness that remains steady regardless of external circumstances. A grounded knowing that reminds you that what appears subtle is often the beginning of something profound. This is why the current moment should not be dismissed simply because it lacks dramatic external signs. What seems ordinary from the outside may actually represent the very edge of transformation. The space you are standing in right now is not the absence of movement. It is the point where movement is preparing to reveal itself. And what comes next often arrives in ways that people rarely anticipate. Many expect transformation to announce itself with unmistakable clarity. They wait for dramatic events. They look for powerful revelations. They imagine a single moment that separates the old from the new. Yet real change frequently arrives in silence. It begins as a subtle shift in the atmosphere of your inner world. Something feels different, but you cannot immediately explain why. You wake up one morning and notice that the emotional burden you have carried for so long feels slightly lighter. A situation that would have triggered frustration or anxiety suddenly produces a different response. A familiar memory arises, yet it no longer carries the same emotional weight. These moments may appear insignificant at first glance, but they are not insignificant at all. This is how authentic transformation often reveals itself, not through noise, but through recalibration, not through dramatic declarations, but through subtle adjustments that gradually reshape your entire experience. The most powerful shifts are often the ones that do not demand attention. They simply begin changing the way you think, feel, and respond. If you are not paying close attention, you may mistake these moments for temporary moods or passing emotional fluctuations. Yet, they are far more important than that. They are evidence that something within you has begun stabilizing. Everything you have been processing, every realization, every emotional release, every moment of uncertainty has been contributing to the formation of something new, and eventually all of those separate experiences begin converging into a deeper sense of clarity. Not the kind of clarity that arrives with urgency or force, not the kind that insists you act immediately, something quieter, something more mature, a clarity that feels almost effortless because it is no longer fighting against itself. This is the point where awareness and emotion begin working together rather than pulling in different directions. What once felt scattered starts becoming cohesive. What once felt confusing begins revealing a sense of direction. And this direction does not emerge because you have analyzed every possibility. It emerges because something deeper within you has reached a state of recognition. This is the third symbolic portal. And what makes it unique is that it asks nothing from you. It does not demand action. It does not require proof. It simply reveals what has already been developing beneath the surface all along. You begin understanding something important, not through logic alone, but through direct experience. You realize that not everything must be carried forward. Certain emotional patterns that once operated automatically no longer feel necessary. Reactions that once seemed unavoidable begin revealing themselves as choices. Attachments that once felt essential start loosening naturally, not because you're forcing yourself to release them, but because they no longer resonate with who you are becoming. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this stage is the absence of pressure. There is no internal voice demanding immediate action, no frantic urgency insisting that you prove your growth, no external force pushing you toward a deadline. Instead, there is space. Space to observe, space to understand, space to allow realizations to settle fully into your awareness before translating them into action. This can feel unfamiliar, especially if you have spent much of your life associating clarity with urgency. Yet this form of clarity stands on its own. It does not need to rush. It does not need to defend itself. It simply exists. And because it exists without pressure, it creates a very different kind of movement. Decisions no longer feel like dramatic turning points. They feel like alignment. Something inside you has already shifted, and your external choices are simply beginning to reflect that reality. You may notice that certain decisions become easier, not because they're objectively simple, but because the internal resistance surrounding them has diminished. There is less overthinking, less cycling through endless possibilities, less emotional conflict. In its place comes a calm recognition of what belongs and what no longer does. This marks an important transition. Transformation is no longer occurring solely within your inner world. It is beginning to express itself through your lived experience. The internal process is becoming visible through your choices, your behavior, and the way you engage with life. And with that comes another powerful development. Trust deepens. This trust is not based on having every answer. You may still have questions. You may still be uncertain about certain aspects of the future. The path ahead may remain partially hidden, yet none of that feels as threatening as it once did. A quiet confidence begins taking root, not confidence in a specific outcome, but confidence in your ability to move forward regardless of what unfolds. It is steady, grounded, unshaken by temporary uncertainty. That is what makes this stage so different. The choices emerging now are not being driven by fear. They are not attempts to escape discomfort. They are not reactions to pressure. They are expressions of alignment. They arise from a deeper understanding of yourself that has been developing through every challenge, every realization, every moment of reflection that brought you here. And in this space, transformation finally becomes tangible. It is no longer something waiting in the future. It is no longer a destination you hope to reach someday. It is becoming part of your daily reality. Not perfectly, not all at once, but through small, meaningful, consistent shifts that reflect a genuine change in the way you see yourself and the life you are creating. This is the moment when awareness begins shaping action naturally, the moment when inner change starts becoming visible in the choices you make, and even if it appears quiet from the outside, even if no one else fully recognizes what is happening, this remains one of the most powerful turning points of all, because somewhere deep within you, a decision has already been made, the transformation has already begun, and now, perhaps for the first time, you are allowing yourself to follow where it leads.